You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. These days, many internet influencers are promoting a wellness trend that sounds like something you might remember from high school bio. Peptides. They're being sold as a way to improve skin, reverse aging. Basically, peptides have become the answer to your choice of wellness issues. But most of what's hawked on Instagram or TikTok is not approved by the FDA. That could change. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. recently said on Joe Rogan's podcast that he wants to relax restrictions on more than a dozen peptides. In the meantime, people are accessing them through methods that some experts say are dangerous. We want to know what the deal is with these peptides that everybody keeps talking about. So we're going to turn to Alex Hogan. He's a senior multimedia producer at Stat News, which covers all things health and medicine. And he's also the host of Status Report. Alex, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much.
So most people, even if they don't know it, they're probably familiar with peptides in their lives, like insulin is a peptide, GLP-1s are peptides. But at their most basic level, what is a peptide?
Some people call them the building blocks of proteins. They're, the body produces them naturally, but we're talking here about synthetic peptides. And the difference being is, peptides that are produced by the body have what's called a short half-life. They kind of get degraded after they've kind of served their function. Whereas synthetic peptide, their half-life is extended synthetically so that they can be more useful and used as a medicine, whether it be in the case of insulin with blood sugar or GLP-1s for weight loss. But there's a whole host of synthetic peptides that are being used by many of these folks in the wellness sphere.
Yeah, so these peptides that are getting so hot right now, they are being sold as a way to achieve certain aesthetic or health goals. What are the things that you've seen peptides being marketed for nowadays, Alex? What has caught your eye in this space?
Some of them, there's BPC 157, I believe it's called. That is it's supposed to encourage tissue repair. So people use it for recovery, and athletes will use it for recovery, or bodybuilders or wellness folks, fitness folks. Then I've seen one they call a tan in a bottle, which is supposed to give you a tan.
What?
Yeah. And
it turns you tan?
Yeah, it works in like your melanin in your body to to give you a tan. Yeah. And then everything in between. There's skincare, weight loss. I mean, there are GLP-1s that you can order from these the same places you get these other peptides that are basically identical, at least chemically, to the main ingredients in semaglutide or tirzepatide, which would be Wegovy and Ozempic, or Mounjaro and Zepbound, which are brand name drugs, and the chemical in those peptides are hopefully similar. But then again, there are other GLP-1 like drugs that you can buy on these sites that are still in clinical trials. They haven't, they're expected to pass, but one of Eli Lilly's new next generation GLP-1 drugs has not yet been approved, but it's called retatrutide, and some of these websites are already selling retatrutide.
And so we mentioned that many, if not most, of these things that we're talking about that people are snapping up for, skin health or whatever other aesthetic and health goals, they're not approved by the FDA yet. How are people getting them, Alex?
So I don't know if you call it a loophole, but you can buy, and many legitimate labs do. I mean, they order these peptides for research use purposes, but they are very clearly labeled as not for human use. In my reporting, I spoke to a researcher, his name's Randy Seeley at University of Michigan, who said that, in his work, they order these peptides to use in their research purposes, but they do quality control on them. And he said, he goes, we trust our vendors. They're good vendors, but we still much more reliable vendors than maybe these other folks would be ordering their peptides from. But when we run our quality control checks on them, sometimes we find that we don't think they're suitable for their use in mice. And he goes, and trust me, our vendors are probably more reputable than some of these others. So that is, that's kind of that's where they're getting them. It's these websites that sell ostensibly for research purposes, And they, the websites are very clear. Everyone I've looked at all say not for human use, but it's all very wink, wink, nod, nod. If you look at these websites, they're clearly, they know who they're actually selling to.
Yeah, they're for people who are like trying to grow muscles or whatever. Like they want to look like the people on Instagram.
That's right. Yep.
So I think that there's this idea that if you already have peptides in your bodies, that they're naturally occurring, that it must be safe to use them. And it kind of is implied in some of the advertising for some of these things. But Alex, what kind of risks should people be keeping in mind here when it comes to peptides?
I just think that there's just not enough data here. I think that some of the ways that they work, and they there's plenty of anecdotal evidence that they work as advertised, like with the BPC 157. It's supposed to encourage tissue repair. And some experts worry that in the way by repairing tissue is just repairing cells and cell growth. And out of control cell growth is what cancer is. So I think that's the kind of things we're worried about. Is we don't know. There's not enough data there, and the long term effects. I mean, GLP-1s are peptides. Insulin's a peptide that's been around for 100 years, and there's just long term data on its safety, but we don't know what long term use of some of these other peptides could lead to.
And we already kind of alluded to this, but the sourcing of these things, because they're not FDA approved, and you have to use this workaround, this gray area where you're ordering materials that are supposed to be for research purposes, oftentimes you just don't know what you're getting. And that's kind of another area of the unknown that can present risks. So now we kind of turn to this idea that maybe they will get more support here in the United States. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has signaled that he would like to ease restrictions on many of these peptides. What would loosening restrictions mean?
I think a lot of it would be lack of enforcement. I think that if I were selling peptides over the internet that were marked as research peptides, I probably wouldn't be looking over my shoulder to the extent I would be under an HHS that was led by someone maybe more hostile, or at least not as supportive as RFK Jr. has been vocally. I mean, he's gone on podcasts and stuff and said he intends on ending the war on peptides. So I don't know. I think as far as what it could be, it's more of a lack of, in my view, it seems like more of a lack of enforcement than anything else.
And there was like a crackdown a few years ago, right? The FDA was going after these compounding pharmacies to stop them from making specific peptides. They were saying there's not enough evidence to just say that they were safe for people to use. But if you have an HHS secretary who's saying, no, we've had this war on peptides and we don't want that to be the case anymore, then you can expect that type of enforcement, as you say, is going to be a lot more infrequent. Alex, I guess my question for you is, why do you think this is happening? Why are people seeking out these peptides at this moment in time, other than it's nice to have good skin and it's nice to have, a good tan or fill in the blank muscles? Like what do you think this says about our moment?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So the video I did on peptides last year, I can see in the YouTube comments what many folks are saying. And many of them, I think it seems to me born out of like a little backlash to the COVID period. I mean, there's been, I think most observers would say that there's been increase in people being opposed to the medical establishment, or being at least much more skeptical of the medical establishment. I mean, I've gotten comments saying that, it's because these things aren't FDA approved that makes them attractive to me. It's kind of a contrarian take. And they'll say like, why would I care about the FDA approval here? They approved the COVID shot, which in their view was extremely dangerous. So I think there's a little bit of contrarianism. I also think that the MAHA movement, I think they like the individualistic way of treating things instead of it's like, I can see what I can do and what I can show and what I can take.
And I do my own research.
And I do my own research.
Yeah.
I do my own research. Exactly. And that's kind of part of the ethos of the movement. I think that's part of it as well.
I know that there is so much happening in the health and wellness space, and you alluded to Make America Healthy again, RFK Jr.'s sort of movement when he aligned with Trump. I think also, that there are very good reasons that people have felt disillusioned with our healthcare system. But it sounds like what you're saying is there's also like a political valence to this. I mean, is that fair? That from what you've seen in this space?
Yeah, it's I do. I think I agree. There's the U.S. healthcare system. There's plenty of things to be critical about and skeptical about how things are done here. I do think that like many things these days, it feels like it's one of the things that got politicized. It just feels like, there's not that there's without exceptions, but it feels like there's a kind of a political movement. This kind of wellness attitude toward wellness is like part of their political identity. That cuts both ways, but I think peptides kind of fits more neatly into that. If that's fair, it seems like that kind of, we don't trust the medical establishment. If they say it's bad, it's probably good. That kind of squares with the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again movement, and just how they kind of see the world.
And the lick-smaxing thing has been layered on top of that, which is just, go to every extreme possible to maximize your beauty and your aesthetic qualities, because that's all that matters. And that's like a form of nihilism that has sort of crept into a lot of these online spaces. And we could do a whole nother podcast on that. But this like very neatly aligns with the idea that you have to go outside of the establishment in order to get a leg up on everybody else, in order to be the maximum hotness that you can possibly be. Because again, that's the only metric that matters.
Yeah, and I think there's also a little bit of a overlap with like the tech right too, like the San Francisco, Silicon Valley world. It's always been the move fast and break things kind of ethos that they have, and it's kind of aligned with that. Then it's like we're going to be on the cutting edge. It might not be, it might not turn out well or something, but if it's going to give me an advantage, it's a risk I'm willing to take.
Alex Hogan is a senior multimedia producer at Stat News and the host of Status Report. Really fascinating stuff, Alex. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. That was great.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.